Hello and welcome to Telesur. I'm Carla Gonzalez. This is Interviews from Quito, the program where we explore some of the biggest challenges facing this country and the region. In today's program, we commemorate 1 year since 3 workers from El Comercio newspaper were kidnapped and killed by a violent group in the border with Colombia. Their case rose many questions, especially on how the government managed the information. Relatives and co-workers of reporter Javier Ortega, photographer Paul Rivas, and driver Efraín Segarra are still looking for answers. We have invited Ricardo Rivas, Paul's brother, to discuss the case. But first, let's take a look at this video.
Standing outside the government palace in Quito, with banners and photographs, the relatives of El Comercio newspaper team, kidnapped and murdered on the northern border with Colombia, are once again demanding to know the truth about the deaths of their family members.
For the relatives, it is very difficult to face this. We will not stop, and we will fight until we know the truth about this case and get justice.
The Inter-American Commission on Human Rights is carrying out an investigation into the kidnappings and murders of driver Efraín Segarra, journalist Javier Ortega, and photographer Paul Rivas. The families went to international organizations due to the silence from the government.
The authorities currently in office have used the policy of silence in response to our actions. Yesterday, they provided us with additional information on the case because they know a year has passed, and today we will talk with the media. We decided to review with our lawyers what has led to the policy of silence regarding the death of Paul, Javier, and Efraín.
A year after the deaths of El Comercio newspaper team, their loved ones didn't know what really happened until now. They say they will take any measures necessary to find the truth.
So thank you for being with us, Ricardo. Let's look back, let's take a step back and look at the case of the 3 journalists. What happened to them a year ago?
Exactly 1 year ago, on March 26, 2018, Paul, Efraín, and Javier went to the border to report on the events that were taking place in the area. Remember that in January, the headquarters of the police was bombed, and then 4 Marines died. So reporters were going to the area to bring this information to the population, to the country, about what were the events going on, what was happening. And the people of Mataje were traveling towards San Lorenzo. And after some days, these people decided to return to their city, to Mataje. So this team of journalists was sent to cover the information, what was the life conditions of the people that were coming back from their cities, and what was happening related to the issue of the area, because of the death of the 4 Marines. So under this context, the kidnapping took place. They were accessing the area. They went through a military control station. They were authorized to cross, so they legally went through. And when they arrived at the area, when they arrived to Mataje, they were intercepted by this guerrilla group. They were brought down from their vehicle and then were taken to Colombia, where they were prisoners for 18 or 19 days. Then they were murdered in Colombia under this context. So the kidnapping took place in Ecuador, they were taken to Colombia, and this is basically the general topic related to this. However, there is a lot of different issues on this matter. There have been a lot of new things that have been said on behalf of the Ecuadorian and the Colombian state about the murder of the journalist in Colombia. They have proven, they mentioned that the kidnapping took place in Ecuador, and then the journalists were taken to Colombia and they were kept prisoners and then murdered. However, Ecuador mentions they were kidnapped in Colombia, and everything took place in Colombia. So this is basically to take responsibility away from both states due to the problems that took place at that moment.
Information that you know now, that Ecuadorians know now, were not known. We didn't know what was happening. There was a lot of reports and criticism towards the government because they had kept some of the information. What has been the reaction of the families?
There's been a lot of criticism from the families because, first of all, they were inexperienced. It's the first time that a case like this happens in our country. Second, they didn't know how to manage it appropriately, the authorities of Ecuador, the kidnapping itself. Then there were lies about what happened. When they mentioned they were negotiating, that the Ecuadorian state was negotiating through their president, they mentioned that they were going to negotiate because they were speaking about the exchange of 3 prisoners with the 3 kidnapped journalists, and they wanted to exchange. So the government of Ecuador decided publicly to accept this and carry out all the legal actions to do this. We know today that this exchange never happened, that this decision for the exchange was never a policy, it never took place on behalf of the government, and nothing was done about this. So one thing is what they said publicly, and the other thing was done really internally. So this lie that started there, through this information that was not valid, now it's clear that they didn't want to negotiate, that the government of Ecuador never wanted to negotiate. It's evident as well that there were 2 things, especially. 2 days after they were taken prisoners, they were freed, and at that moment, during those days, they told us that that was false, that they weren't freed. But now we know, with information of journalistic investigations, that indeed they were freed, that there was an operation to get them. There was a congratulation on behalf of the defense minister of Colombia to the defense minister of Ecuador, but it never happened. They were never freed. The question is, why? Why didn't it take place? And the intelligence of both countries mentioned they were going to be liberated and that they were already in a given area. And now we know also the reason behind this. We were told that operations, military operations and police operations never stopped in the area. Well, they told us that the military operations were going to stop at the area, but they never stopped, they never ceased. So continuing with this operation led to the fact that they were not liberated, and then also led to the murder of them. Why? Because instead of stopping the operations, now there's evidence that the Colombian police went to the Ecuadorian territory, and from Ecuador they operated to Colombia in order to try and to stop this group, this guerrilla group. And this is the most dangerous thing, because who authorized foreign forces to come to Ecuador and operate from our territory? A political authority, a military authority, or political authority? And this needs to be answered, because these are latent questions and that are extremely important, should be solved right away. So this led to the murder, because there weren't any conditions to free them. Clearly, they never wanted to negotiate, and it was important not to bring them alive. It was important to kill the boss of this guerrilla group. And then there was another question about this. Who wanted them dead? Because apparently, as they were kidnapped, well, they were given information, apparently, very sensitive information from authorities that were involved in drug trafficking processes. And of course, many people didn't like this. They didn't want them alive. And that's why military operations, instead of stopping, started becoming more and more intensive to take place in the sector. And unfortunately, these are the facts. And under this context, the government of Ecuador has a lot to say, or the authorities that were in charge at the moment, to bring this truth that is analyzed and that we know already.
We heard a couple of months ago there was an audio that was leaked by Lenín Moreno, the president, speaking at a Security Council that he had with his ministers, where he apparently says that the lives of 3 or more people are not important, but the integrity of the state is more important. There was some talks with the government that they told the families that they were going to release all this information so people would know what was actually being discussed. Has this happened?
Indeed. An audio was leaked where you can listen to the voice of the president mentioning that the dignity of a country is above the life of the people. And this created a lot of controversy in the country and internationally as well. And of course, quickly, as it was the main authority of the country, they declassified this information. But when they declassified this information, for us, there's even more inconsistencies than the audio itself. Because including the declassification of it is an evidence of that policy, that the lives were not important, that the dignity of a country was above the people, above the life of these people, which is absolutely impossible to understand, to hear from a president. But beyond this, if you read this statement that has been declassified, that has been transcribed textually, it evidences that they were negotiating at a point. But the question is, with whom were they negotiating?
Even there's a video that came out a couple of days ago, but that Ecuadorians did not know of its existence, that they were actually a video of the 3 journalists saying to a camera who took them, what they wanted in return for them, and the families did not know at the time. They thought there weren't any evidence of that they were alive.
This is even worse. Yesterday, this audio was leaked, and if you analyze it, it includes very tough things, very difficult things to hear. This was originated the first day of the kidnapping, and here they mention, this is the organization that kidnapped us. We are calm, we have been treated fairly, our lives depend on the president as long as they comply with the conditions they want to negotiate. We've been told that they are negotiating. So then if you analyze this context, what do you think? Well, you realize that they are calm because they know that they depend on the president, and that the president or the authorities or the people in charge of the government are negotiating this. So they were kidnapped on the 26th, but they have been negotiated from before. They already knew about how dangerous it was. They knew who they were and what they wanted. And this video, we got it on the 26th. But the first time we saw it in the crisis committee, the 3 people that represent the family, we saw this on March 29th. So 3 days after a total uncertainty, we saw this video because there was this matter about the false release, and then there was a crisis committee where they showed us this video from a cell phone, and they told us, we just got this video, we don't know who they are or what they want. But here it's evident, and we know today that they already knew about this, so these are systematic lies. And I think there's 3 or 4 lies already. The government already knew about this, so why were they lying? Why were they lying not only to 3 families, but to the rest of the country of Ecuador and to the international community as well? Because it's a sensitive topic that transcended borders and was known in all the region due to the importance that this situation of free expression and the right of all the people have to get informed, and the right that we also have to security and to travel every region. So the murder of the journalist, unfortunately in this case, cannot be sentenced as thousands of cases have happened in our continent, and we need answers. This is a case that even has warrants and measures, and we are fighting to take to light.
How is the investigation going? Has it advanced at some point? What is the legal status of what the families are asking for the state?
Well, the investigations on the Ecuadorian side, well, there are 2 points. The Ecuadorian and the Colombian sides. In Colombia, this is a very specific topic. They only investigate the kidnapping and the murder, but there's been statements from people who have been apprehended, and there's significant information for the case. but the case must be analyzed. The District Attorney's Office of Colombia didn't want to do it due to the responsibilities of the government when abandoning the border areas. In the case of Ecuador, the investigation is stuck because here we have more responsibility. Beyond the abandonment itself, the District Attorney's Office is only researching or investigating where the kidnapping took place, if in Ecuador or Colombia. But there's a lot of situations that should be analyzed and new lines of investigation should be opened to reach the truth. So in Ecuador, it's stuck. We are waiting through the request that the families made that was taken and was accepted by the Inter-American Commission of Human Rights. When a special team of follow-up was created that is set to send a final report, and it will happen at the end of this month, and is set to be given to both governments so that they can provide their observations, remarks, and then this report in April will be publicly shown with possible recommendations both for Colombia and Ecuador. And according to this, we'll see what we should face on this case.
For me, it's a bit frustrating to understand. For example, a book came out, and I'm sure you know it, Rehenes, that actually tells the story of what happened and some interviews with people that worked with the head of the armed group that took them. And they say all these things, that they had happened and they knew they were going to release them, that they knew that there were operations that were happening at the moment. And we have conversations with the people that were there, and they were saying, yeah, we were going to release them, but there were operations and we couldn't do them, and the state knew, the Ecuadorian government knew, and that the families still don't know. Have you seen this book, and what have you seen any difference of the information that they gave you?
I've read the book. Some of the information there we already knew about, but there's other information that was new for us and it called our attention, especially the military operations. Well, not military, but police operations. How jointly the police of Colombia works in coordination with the police of Ecuador from our territory towards the Colombian territory. And we need a lot of explanation from the authorities, and the authorities have not said a lot about this. And we were already suspicious about this, but this book sheds a lot of light on the possible murder, which didn't take place the 12th or the 13th, but actually the 7th of April. And here we understand how and the reason why, after April 7th, by putting together all the information that we have, it makes a lot of sense, and the proposal of it taking place on April 7 makes sense, because then you realize that we're not negotiating. They made actions quicker just to say that the government wanted to do a lot of things, but unfortunately this guerrilla group didn't want to negotiate, when actually the one who didn't want to negotiate was, since the beginning, the government of Ecuador. And not even since the beginning of our problem, but since the beginning of January, where there were already some issues taking place there in San Lorenzo. So it provides a lot of input. It brings a context about the things that took place. And I've read the book, and I have joined what's mentioned there with the things that we lived through, what we lived in the crisis committee, with all the lies that we were told about how they lied to us, how they lied in our faces. They systematically lied to us, saying things that they didn't have to say, because when things are carried out transparently, and even if they're tough, you have to say them as they are. If the government of Ecuador had as a policy the lack of negotiation, then it was going to be acceptable to take this position from the government of Ecuador. But they should have said us, have mentioned that to us, so that we could find options to negotiate with them and bring them back alive. And we stated this at the crisis committee about the option of getting negotiation experts to release them. But we had a negative response from the government of Ecuador, and they said no, that there were stages to follow, that it was not appropriate, and that they were going to tell us when it was convenient to hire other people to negotiate, but that their commitment was to bring them alive. Their commitment was not to bring them alive, because they knew a lot of information, and now we understand why. So this is something that must be said.
A Unfortunately, just look forward because we can't change the past. But can we look forward and try to see how we can stop this from happening to another Paul, to another Javier, to another Efraín?
There's a lot of things. Our struggle to look for the truth is not only for the three families, it goes beyond. It's about the context of the country and the region. And part of this struggle is, first of all, getting to the bottom of it, fighting against these levels of corruption, and finally, making both the government of Ecuador and the government of Colombia understand what's happening at the borders, because there are more victims that are the people living in those areas, and they are not taken care of. We can see how children, for example, when they get to the schools, what type of information can they have when they live under a context of violence? So how are you raising these children? What are we raising? Future guachos that will be enrolled in the guerrilla, because the only model that they can follow is this guerrilla who, for better or for worse, has provided money for the people of this area. So they see this as an economic model where they can buy or live off in order to have resources to eat from, because there is abandonment from the state. This is the government they are following. People disappearing, young people disappearing at the border. If you kill more people, if you take more people prisoner with the guerrilla, then their groups come here and do this, and their groups start becoming smaller if you kill them. And how do they get more people? From the families, from the young people in the border, and they're forced to become part of these groups. So the reality is more complex, and that's why we need to work to make this visible. The promise of President 1 year ago of creating the table of journalist security, where's that? A year has gone by and we don't have any answers. It's only about the reaction, about the moment, but where are the journalists right now? Are they going to the border? Do you think they can access this border and they can work independently, freely, and report the citizens about what's happening at the area? No, they can't. No, it's still restricted. So all this is where we should fight. These are all the variables that we should target so that we can have an optimal security level, not only in our country on our border with Colombia, but I think that these are problems that happen in many borders of the countries in the region, and this must be evidence, and we should speak about this truly, because the solution is not easy. Yes, it's not. But as countries, we need to be clear about this. We need to face the problems and bring a solution to this.
Unfortunately, we are running out of time, Ricardo, but thank you very much for your time and for your very thoughtful ideas on what's happening, and to keep the memory, of course, of Paul alive.
Thank you very much.
So we've been talking to Ricardo Rivas, brother of Paul Rivas, one of the journalists who was kidnapped and killed in the border with Colombia, who, like many Ecuadorians, still want answers. Thank you for watching. This is Interviews from Quito. I'm Carla Gonzalez. Until next time.